so I'm back with my admission story. So as you all know, I went in for my Pegj placement on the 20th of February, and there was a few things that they did wrong in my initial admission downstairs in the endoscopy department. They didn't give me my allergy band straight away. They didn't take a cannula out of my arm, even though they knew it was tissued and they couldn't use it, and therefore my arm was bruised and swelling more than it needed to be. They didn't have a bed ready for me when I went in, despite the fact knowing that I would need to stay over at least 24 hours anyway. So that procedure could have been cancelled straight as soon as I got there, because they couldn't have found a bed. And they didn't really go through consent with me. They did, however, take down the list of my medications that I was already on, and I expected that to be written up on the Cardex for when I went to the ward. Now, they did find a bed for me. They were supposed to have found one on gastro or medical, and they found one on the surgical ward, which is fair enough. I'd had a surgical procedure, theoretically anyway. So I went to the surgical ward, and the nurse came to me within half an hour of me being there, explained that I was nil by mouth, and that she was going to give me some fluids. She said she'd be back soon, so she said because she needed to get them written up. So I said fine. So she went off, and that nurse never came back to me at all. None of my usual medications had been written up on a Cardex, so I didn't receive any of my normal medications at all. Now, bear in mind, straight away, I'm going to say this, bear in mind I had no adequate nutrition or hydration since the night before my procedure, so since the Sunday evening. Now, I went to the surgical ward. They didn't give me TED stockings. They didn't give me, normally a hospital protocol, regardless of whether you've had surgery or not, is if you're there for 3 days or more, then they would also give you heparin injections or blood thinning injections or whatever to prevent blood clots. I never got any of that either while I was there, and I was in for a week. Now, even though I was asking about them, because I've been in a hospital before for dehydration, and I was given them then without even being asked and consulted. But this time, even on a surgical ward, I wasn't given them. And like I said, I wasn't given TED stockings. There was a lady across the way from me who had been given TED stockings and being given these injections of blood thinning injections, and she'd only had an endoscopy done and an NJ tube placed, so she couldn't understand either why I hadn't been given the TED stockings or the blood thinning injections after I'd been there for 3 days or more. Anyway, moving on. I get to the ward about 6:30. I was supposed to have been on fluids. They didn't give me the fluids. And then it wasn't till... So I didn't have my usual medications written up. I didn't have any pain management written up. And I didn't get my fluids. And they weren't written up either originally. I had my first lot of pain management, which was paracetamol through IV at 11:30 on the Tuesday evening. So I'd gone from... My procedure was finished around 4:30. Sorry, I went for my procedure about 4:30. It was finished about 5:30. So I'd gone from 5:30 per se all the way through till 11:30 without any pain management whatsoever, because I didn't even get my own medication that I would normally have, and nothing had been written up for me. And obviously it took them till 11:30 at night just to get paracetamol written up for me. I explained that that wasn't going to be enough, and that I needed to have different pain management because I take paracetamol regularly anyway, so my body metabolizes it differently than what you would normally metabolize it as, and obviously it barely touches a headache. So she was like, okay, I will go and speak to the doctor and see if we can get something else. So I said fine. I asked about my fluids. She said that they still hadn't been written up, but she'd look into it. So I said fine. By this point, an elderly lady had come onto the ward. A nurse had been lovely to her, said that she would go and get her some gel and stuff for her mouth because she was nil by mouth. I'd asked this nurse could she get me some, and she completely ignored me and walked away. I even asked for sponges, you know, the little wet sponges that you can use to wet around your mouth. I was ignored. So I got my first lot of paracetamol at 11:30 at night. Tuesday morning came, well, 3:30 in the morning came, and I still was in a lot of pain. I needed to go to the bathroom. I couldn't even get out of bed. I managed to be able to drag myself up and sit at the side of the bed, and I couldn't move I was in floods of tears by this point because I was in so much pain. So I buzzed my buzzer and I was like, I had paracetamol 4 hours ago, so I should be allowed some more. So I asked her for some pain management. She said, oh, I'll go and see if you do any more paracetamol. I said, well, paracetamol doesn't even take the edge off. Like, is there anything else I can have? And she said, well, I don't know if there's anything else written up for you. I'll have to go and ask the doctor. She said, but I said, well, paracetamol, can I have paracetamol in the meantime? She said, I'll go and see. And then she said, I'll come back to you. So I said, fine. So I got up, managed to get myself off the bed, and I couldn't even stand up straight. I was in that much pain, couldn't stand up straight. So I was doubled over, holding my stomach, went to the bathroom. As I walked into the bathroom, the buzzers went off again. Now, on a ward, especially at night time, you can typically understand that the buzzers will go off quite a lot. There's quite a few people that buzz the buzzers at night time. Because they're in a lot of pain, they can't get to sleep, whatever the reason. There's usually the buzzer goes off quite a few times. It gone off a few times before I'd buzzed it, but then it gone off again after I'd buzzed it, and I was just going to the toilet at this point. I just got into the toilet door and I overheard one of the nurses say, what is this happy hour? Now, I'm not being funny, but if you want to be in the healthcare setting or you want to be a nurse or whatever, and you, especially if you're working on a surgical ward, you have to expect patients to buzz their buzzers because they're going to need pain management. They might be deteriorating, they might not be able to breathe, depending on what procedures they've had. And they're supposed to have OBS every 15 minutes. I had my OBS done twice. From 6:30 all the way through till 11:30, I'd had my observations done twice, despite the fact I'd had a surgical procedure done. I hadn't had it done all night. Until the next morning at 6:30 in the morning, I think it was, I was getting my obs done again. So I'd only had my observations done in 12 hours 3 times, when technically it should have been done more because I was on a surgical ward. But to say that you know, what is this happy hour, and let patients overhear you saying that, you're not only making a rod for your own back, but you're also bringing the ward down, and you're bringing yourself down as a person. If you don't want to be in that type of job, then don't be in that type of job, but don't make your feelings heard. If you want to think that, oh, what is this happy hour, and think it, then think it by all means, but don't say it out loud, because that's just wrong and on so many levels. So I was shocked, went to the toilet, came back. I struggled back into bed. The lady across the way from me was awake because obviously the buzzers were going off. She asked me if I was okay, and I explained to her, like, I hadn't had any proper pain management. And she went, what have you had done? So I explained to her what I'd had done. And she went, and you've not been given anything? I said, they've given me paracetamol. I said, by IV, that's it. And she said, that's not good enough. That's not going to do anything. I said, well, that's what I said. I said, but I've asked her for some more. I said, I've just got to wait for her to come back. I said, and she's told me she's going to buzz the doctor again about something more. I said, I've not even had my own normal medication either. I said, despite the fact they asked me what I was on when I came in. And she went, well, that's ridiculous. I said, I'm nil by mouth and they've not even given me fluid yet. So she was shocked by that. So anyway, I must have dozed off for whatever reason, like maybe tiredness just sunk in or whatever. But next thing I know, it's like 6:30 in the morning. I think it was about 5:30, something like that, and I must have just closed my eyes for a minute. Next time I opened my eyes, and the nurse is next to me, I checked my watch, it was like 6:30. And she's hooking me up to some more paracetamol. She went, here's paracetamol, hopefully it'll make you feel a bit more comfortable. And I was like, I asked for this at 3:30. And she was like, oh, sorry, we've been busy. And I was like, okay, that's not good. I said, if you're not getting anything better, I said, because obviously this didn't do anything. I was up in the middle of the night, like crying because of how much pain I was in. I said, because paracetamol didn't do anything. And she went, there's nothing been written up for you. So I turned around and said, I said, seriously? I said, I've been asking since last night. And she turned around and said, oh, nothing's been written up. She said, they have been bleeping the doctor. She said, but nothing's been written. I said, what about my usual medication? She went, no, nothing's been written. I said, well, what about fluids then? She went, as far as I can see, nothing's been written. And I said, but they were supposed to, I said, I got told they were giving me fluids when I came up onto the ward at 6:30 last night. And she went, well, nothing's been written. She said, I'll have to look into it. I was like, let me go, she'll be back to me. She went, yeah. So anyway, she went off. Somebody else came, gave my observations, did my blood sugars, and then went away. I even said to her, can I have some sponges for my mouth because I'm nil by mouth? She went, I'll see what I can do. Didn't get the sponges, didn't get any of my usual medications. I don't want this video going on too long, so I'm just going to speed it up a little bit. So I didn't get my usual medications that they'd written down when I came in for I think it was for 2 days. So I hadn't had my medication since the Monday morning. It was Wednesday evening when I got at least 2 of the medications that I was supposed to have been on. One of them was asthma medication, and the other one was one of my PPIs. And then by the Thursday, I managed to get all of them. So I'd been there for 3 days before they managed to give me anything. Tuesday, the day after my procedure, at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, they started hooking me up to fluid that I should have had 13 hours previous. They hooked me up to my bag of fluid. They said it would take 8 hours to go through, but because they hadn't been flushing my cannula, which was obviously a baby cannula, if you watch my previous video you'll understand why. It was a baby cannula. They hadn't been flushing it. Once they finished the paracetamol, they'd leave the paracetamol bag hooked up to me for a few hours after they'd hooked it up. So they weren't flushing the tube, they were literally just leaving it. So that occluded, so it kept on occluding. Every time I moved, it would occlude. Every time I wanted to go to the toilet, it would occlude, because obviously it was my right hand. My right hand's my dominant hand. So every time I moved it, it would occlude. So they eventually turned it off and said that they were going to keep it off until they spoke to the ward sister. I then ended up having to speak to the ward sister myself, who then came and changed the cannula over, to which I went through 4 cannulas while I was there because they kept having to use baby ones on me. They then decided, so I had bruises everywhere. They kept on blowing them all the time, blowing my veins. Then, so I got my bag of fluid on the Tuesday morning. It wasn't until, I think it was Tuesday afternoon at 4:30, so almost 24 hours after my procedure was done. So I went in at about 4 o'clock, 4:30, I started with my procedure. So 24 hours since my procedure started, from the day before, I finally got Oromorph. I then didn't get any more till 11:30 that night. Like I said, Wednesday evening, I finally was able to get at least 2 of my own medications, but that was because I was kicking off, because I almost collapsed on Wednesday because of the amount of air occluding behind my chest cavity from the air that was pumped inside me. Because like I said on my previous video, I don't disperse air naturally like most people would do. My body just doesn't know what to do with it, so it traps behind anything it can, so my lungs, my bladder, whatever. So I was doubled over in pain from that, doubled over in pain from my stomach, waiting for the meds cart to come around to ask for medication, because that's what you're usually supposed to do, to then be told later on the Wednesday that I could have just asked for my pain management, they would have just given it to me anyway, even with morphine, which shocked me. It wasn't until the Thursday that I got my usual medications. I was nil by mouth till Thursday afternoon, or it might have been Wednesday afternoon. I think it was Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday tea time. I was nil by mouth till then. I'd had no adequate fluid or no adequate nutrition at all since Sunday evening. Like, you're talking like fluid about 9:30, feed 5:30, Sunday. So by Wednesday, I had 50 mils of water pumped through my Pegj to make sure that it was working, because they didn't use it for the first 24 hours. Then Tuesday evening they started with water, and then Wednesday they started me on feed. So it wasn't until Wednesday evening that they actually gave me like, obviously I'd had my bag of fluid on the Tuesday, but it wasn't until Wednesday they decided that I was my nil by mouth could come off, because they'd now just started me on feed. So it could have been Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. I had been given no sponges or anything to wet my mouth. I'd only had 1 bag of fluid in all of that time. So in 3 days, I'd only had 1 bag of fluid. And I wasn't getting my adequate medication, and this is by Wednesday evening. The doctor came Wednesday morning. I'd almost passed out. I was in so much pain with the air and my stomach. He didn't understand why I was still in so much pain, but I said, ask your nurses, because, you know, I hadn't been given pain management. And then Thursday came, I was on adequate pain management because I was on my own medications, my heart medications, everything. Most of the medications I take, I can't just stop. I have to be weaned off them. and they literally just stopped them point blank. So I hadn't had any medications of my own medications since Monday morning till Wednesday evening, and even then I only got 2 of my usual until Thursday. And then I was in from Thursday, which then I changed my dressing on my stomach. It was oozing loads of like gastric juices and everything, but it was also oozing green gunk. So I told them about it on the Thursday evening. So Friday they swabbed it. The doctor then came round and was like, we don't understand why you're still here, like you should have gone home by now, don't understand why you're in so much pain. I explained about the gunk coming out my stomach and how they'd swabbed it. He said there would have been no point swabbing it because it would only grow bacteria from my normal skin. So that was dismissed and it was basically discarded, despite the fact that was the beginning of an infection in my stomach. He blamed me for not putting the flange on, or the external bumper, which is known as the flange, tight enough on my stomach, despite the fact it was really tight and I was actually pulling it too tight to stop the leakage and everything. Saying that I was leaving it off too much to clean it, even though I was literally just brushing something round, like a cotton bud round it, and then basically putting a new pad on and then putting the flange back. He was telling me off for that, even though he wasn't even there. Then after that, things seemed to get a little bit better on my point of view. I was getting adequate pain management. I was dealing with this supposable infection in my stomach, and they said to me that they were going to speak to the dietitians. As long as they was happy, I could go home. And I asked, could I go home? And they said, yeah, but the dietitians had already gone home on the Friday afternoon by this point. So I had to wait till the Monday. So, because the dietitians don't work weekends. So I waited till the Monday. I'm looking over here. This is like a new setup I've got. Sorry. So I'm looking over here, but actually my camera's here. So I apologise if I'm looking over there. So basically, everything seemed to improve a little bit with me. I was helping the lady across the way with her nutrition pump, even helping the nurses set up her feeds because even they didn't know how to use the pump, some of them, so I was helping them with that. She was just waiting to be signed off by the nutrition team, but her referrals weren't getting sent off, so that was another error, but that was for her. And then I was shocked by the lack of care they were given. So most of us ended up having to, like, well, most of the ward, I didn't, because obviously I don't take a lot by mouth. So most of the patients were basically physically having to ask for jugs of water because they weren't coming round to fill the jugs of water up. They would come round maybe twice, 3 times if they were lucky with the drinks cart for cups of tea, when normally they're supposed to come round about 4 times. But they were lucky if they came round twice. There was a lady that was next to me that was in a lot of pain, that was sat in a chair. We had to like physically hold her in the chair while we waited for the nurses to come and lift her back into bed, because if we hadn't have done, she would have fell on the floor. So we had to buzz for nurses for her. One of the other patients, she had come in with, she'd had an abscess surgically removed. It was a huge abscess. Her husband had showed me a picture of it. And you could fit 2 fists in it, and my fists are small, but you could fit 2 very large male fists in it. And she was meant to have a dressing change twice a day. And obviously she was wearing a pad because she didn't know when she needed to go for a bowel movement. She already had a catheter in. But rather than have nurses come in and check in that pad at regular intervals throughout the day to see if she'd had a bowel movement, she didn't. So she was left in the same pad from the minute they changed her dressing and a pad in the morning, to most of the time. Now I was there for 7 days. Most of the time they would change her dressing in the morning, give her a new pad to wear and clean her up, and then most of the time they would leave her in the same pad with the same dressing on until the next morning. Which is absurd and diabolical, especially when this woman had been septic previously, and almost died. So she needed properly looking after, and they weren't giving her the adequate care they should have been giving her. And it wasn't until I kept on pointing out, like, you should have someone checking your pad regularly to make sure that your dressing is stayed clean, your dressing doesn't come off, and the stool that your excrement is going in into your abscess. Like, you don't want that to reinfect you or anything like that. Like, you need someone checking on this regularly. And if they're not doing that, then they should be. Like, you need to start buzzing your buzzer and saying, like, you know, can you check my pad for me, because I don't know if I've done anything. And it wasn't until the day I was leaving, I think somebody must have said, like, you do know there's a patient in there telling, like, the other patient that you should be checking a pad regularly because she has an abscess and things, and obviously no one's doing it. So somebody came in and was asking her throughout that day, like, oh, do you want me to check your pad? Do you want me to see you need it changing? And she was like, oh yeah, like, obviously, like, things had changed for her because I'd mentioned it, and I think people had overheard what I'd said. But I was there for 7 days, and only 3 days out of the 7 did this woman have her dressing and her pad changed twice a day. And obviously pads for stool and bowel movement should be checked on a regular basis. No patient, whether in a care home or in a hospital setting, should be left wearing the same pad, toilet pad, all day, especially all day and all night, but especially all day. Especially if they have an abscess or even a bed sore or anything that has a dressing on it. They shouldn't be left sat in the same dirty pad for hours on end. It should be checked regularly and cleaned regularly. It's unacceptable to expect a patient to sit in the same pad for hours on end. You wouldn't expect a baby to wear a nappy from the minute they get up to the minute they go to bed, or from the minute they get up to the minute they get up the next morning, because that would be seen as abuse. And it's the same principle for an elderly patient. They should not be sat in the same pad for 24 hours or even for 12 hours without being changed or without being checked, because that is abusive. So I know the NHS is short-staffed, and don't get me wrong, I'm really thankful for the NHS. You know, they've saved my life, they've helped me give birth, they've done a lot of things for me, and I really appreciate the fact that we have them. And most of the time the staff are wonderful, and they're really gracious, and they're really kind, and they're really courteous. But you get the odd nurse that shouldn't really be nursing, that say things like, what is this happy hour? That can be really mean and horrible. And I understand that they're short-staffed, I understand that they're overworked, I understand that they've just gone through a pandemic and they're tired. But no patient should be neglected in such a way like this elderly patient was, like my care was. I wasn't given adequate pain management after having a surgical procedure for technically being stabbed in the stomach and having an open wound. I wasn't given the adequate care. No one even bothered to check my dressing at all the whole time I was there. I had to do my own care. It was like, I shouldn't even, like, if people want to do their own care, they shouldn't even be taken up a bed. But the fact that people are not getting adequate nutrition, adequate pain management, adequate pad changes, things like that, it also makes hospital stays longer, because then patients then become reinfected, or they can't get better quick enough because they're not getting adequate nutrition or hydration. And it makes the hospital stays longer, which then makes the beds be kept up longer, which means more people are losing out on being admitted for surgeries and procedures because they haven't got the beds for them to go into. And it just ends up being a vicious cycle. So if they give the adequate care in the first place, then none of this would happen, and you would have more beds vacant so that more patients could come in and be dealt with. I mean, I'm hoping that this lady has now gone to the care home that they were setting her up for, and she's now getting better, adequate care. But my heart broke for her. It really did. You know, I know what it's like to have an abscess on your bum, because she had hers on her lower back. But I know what it's like to have an abscess. They're really painful, and mine was on my bottom. You know what I mean? So I know how painful abscesses can be. So to be able to sit on an abscess or lay on an abscess that it needs a dressing change twice a day, because it's that bad, it needs to be changed twice a day, because obviously an open wound is going to ooze liquid, it's going to ooze blood and gunk and all kinds. It needs to be changed regularly. Your dressing needs to be changed regularly. When I had my abscess, it needed to be changed on a daily basis. Hers was so big it needed to be changed twice a day, and unfortunately She was most of the time, like I said, I was there for 7 days, only 3 times, and this was spaced out over the course of a week. Only 3 times in the course of a week did she have her dressing changed twice a day. But that pad was changed at the same time as her dressing, when ideally that pad should have been looked at and changed regularly throughout the day in case she had a bowel movement. So, you know, my heart bleeds for people that are not getting adequate care in the NHS, and it is appalling. But that is basically my admission. A lot of errors were made. A lot of things were caused. I should never have been in hospital for the week, but I was in hospital longer because they didn't give me adequate pain management and they didn't take a proper adequate care of me. And yet I was in a lot less of a state than some of the patients that were on the ward with me, and yet I wasn't given the care that I should have been given. And like I said, I was there for a week and I wasn't even given the blood thinning medication, even though I have a high history of blood clots. I wasn't given the blood thinning medication after 3 days of being there. I wasn't given TED stockings to prevent any blood clots in my legs. I was just told to keep mobile. And yet the lady across the way from me was mobile as much as I was, if not more so. And she was given the TED stockings. She was given the blood thinning medications. So I don't understand a lot of it, but I do think better care should have been given to me, to other people on that ward. And, you know, the hospital that I go to, I have had traumatic experiences from there before. I've become severely agoraphobic from there before. I've had a lot of the reason I have generalized anxiety over my health is because of that hospital, and I hate going there. I've been told at some point I'm going to need a colostomy fitted, and I've actually said when I was leaving the hospital that if it gets to the point where I end up at that hospital to have a colostomy fitted, I'm going to insist that I want to see in writing all my usual medications written up on a Cardex and signed off by a doctor before they even put me under general anaesthetic. And I want to come out of the general anaesthetic being on a pain pump that I can manage myself if I need additional pain management, so that I don't have to keep buzzing a buzzer to ask the nurses, because I should not have been left in the situation I was. In fact, none of the patients on that bay should have been left in the situation that they were. But unfortunately, because of shortages in staff and because of the fact that people just can't be bothered anymore because they're so tired and they're just fed up, adequate care wasn't given. So that is unfortunate, but that was my admission story. Again, I apologise, videos are so long, but if you've got any similar stories, my heart bleeds for you. It really does. My heart is breaking for everyone that is not getting the adequate care that they need and is getting neglected by the NHS, because the NHS used to be a really wonderful place, and it still is wonderful for the majority, but there is certain things that are slipping and it's making it out to be bad. And actually it's a really good place. They've saved people's lives. They're an amazing thing to have in the UK. You know, it's free, and I'm very grateful that we have that in this country, but it is starting to slip, and it breaks my heart that fewer and fewer people are getting into the job that generally want to help people, and instead we're left with those that don't really want to be there anymore because of everything that they've already been through because of the crappy government we have. So hopefully things will change in the future. But thank you so much for watching this video. Like I said, if you've got any similar stories, feel free to share them below, and as always you can DM me on my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe for more content, and I'll speak to you again soon. Bye.